it's not necessarily and specifically online marketing. This is from A to Z. You guys do strategic consulting for companies on how to build, how to administer, how to run, how to grow, the whole thing.
Yeah, it's actually we don't do any online marketing. I feel like my skill set in that domain is like kind of like eroded. Like I still know enough to be dangerous, but like you said, it evolves quickly. So I'm not the expert that I used to be, years ago. Now the reason I'll start with the what we do, but the reason what led me to the idea of PNR, what we do now was at Google. I was sitting down with presidents and CMOs and talking about their approach to marketing. But I was like, but it's not just about investment on our platform. You have to think about maybe internalizing some competencies, your internal structure. I was trying to help them really from a consultative perspective, and I was always kind of looked at with a bit of like conflict of interest. Like, yeah, thanks, Nectar, but you want us to spend more on Google, which was the case. Yeah. But I really believe my recommendations made sense for them. So that gave me this embryo of an idea. It's like, the companies haven't yet fully understood the impact this is having, not just on their marketing, but really their entire strategy and how they approach going to market, thinking about their overall
basically surviving. In the long run,
surviving, growing, spreading to new markets, all of the above, and the idea for that's okay. How do we help companies do that? So it's like we look at the market. Oh, there's this thing that exists. It's called management consulting, where you sit down with the boards of companies and CEOs, and you help them map out where they want to go, and you help them based on your expertise. And we're like, we want to do that, and that was the core embryo of the idea. And we've evolved a bit since then. It's still very similar to that vision, but now going back to what we were talking about in terms of moving faster, the way we approach it now is like we don't only talk about technologies and their importance. Obviously, all of our team comes from technology companies, but we approach it as how do we actually help them execute on what they're working on? Because we think the biggest factor of success in an organization is planning well and then being able to adapt based on the plan that you made, right? So this notion of agility. So the whole notion of digital, like I said, it's fading to the background. So like I've removed the word digital from our website. I'm like, I don't want to see it. Like it's if you don't think it's important, you're like, we're not going to help you. Like you're beyond like the kind of the.
But there's companies that still exist that they don't. Like the digital is out of the question, or
that don't prioritize it enough.
Really,
for sure, yeah. And I think that's a dangerous spot to be in for some companies. I think there's good reason because maybe not their industry hasn't been impacted as much. Like
what?
If you're in like forestry, for instance, right? Like if you're into lumber, it's like I don't think pixels are going to hurt you, but you're probably looking at it. If you're not looking at it, for instance, from a manufacturing perspective, right? How these technologies, like I mentioned, the agriculture example. You need to be looking at it from a manufacturing perspective, very much so. So if you haven't, then it has impacted you. Maybe not from like a marketing perspective, but from a manufacturing perspective, definitely.
So right now, excuse me, are you looking mostly to new startups or new companies, and you want to get them started from ground up, or are you also working with the larger companies that want to kind of restructure and they want to kind of redirect scope?
Yeah, it changed over time because like the lesson, it's our fifth year now that we're starting. Our first year, we're like, oh, you know what, we're gonna take it for the world, and we're gonna go knock on like Air Canada and like Bank of Montreal and like all these companies that we know that they need help because we just look at their websites. Like, they definitely don't prioritize it.
And also, a lot of these companies you've probably worked with them in the past, or
well, that's it. We had a little bit of context, but then we realized, okay, we're three guys in a basement, and like we don't have a brand, and like we haven't done this before, so we don't have the track record of doing it. So our first customers were more early stage, more tech companies. But today we've evolved to work a lot more with much larger companies that are more in the veins of like some of the brands that I mentioned before that are looking for help at that transformative level. At really helping them navigate the waters of this technological disruption. And so our customer set today tends to be, I want to say, more mid-market firms, so usually with several 100,000 employees.
Is that the comfort zone for you, or do you still take on the smaller guys, or do you still maybe look at getting the bigger ones? Right
now, like our comfort is definitely bigger companies, just because it's been our backgrounds, our careers. We work with larger companies, and it's also where we have the biggest impact, because you need to have several layers of management for to hire a management consulting practice that makes sense for you, because we come in again top level, and our recommendations can have even if it's like a 3% change of what you're doing, can have a massive impact. So, and earlier stage companies are less accustomed; they're also less mature to working with consulting firms. So we do from time to time, but more opportunistic, to be quite honest.
Has there been any time where you walk in and you have certain ideas, but then you realize that it's just not going to happen? I mean, you're either late in the game, or you can't really help the company evolve in this ecosystem.
Yeah, we're lucky that we get to choose our customers. Our customers choose us, but a lot of what we do is based on trust, right? We're not selling bus tickets online. We're not optimizing a checkout cart, like in an e-commerce website. We're helping people solve really difficult strategic challenges with their companies, right? So to do that, you need to be able to engender a lot of trust very quickly, right? So a lot of what we do has to be super confidential, and because we're touching all the numbers of the company, we're touching the deepest challenges that they have, really looking at them like naked on the surgery table, right, on the operating table. To go back to your question, it really is one of deep trust that we need to work with customers. So if that's not there, then it's going to be harder to work with certain